comes to players and how they're going to perform, it would be 2020. But nevertheless, we're going to take a stab at 6 players, 3 of us each. We're going to break down 3 players that we have that would be considered big names without big value, okay? And so these are names that are relatively well-known inside of the fantasy football community, and we're going to go ahead and break this down from it seems like we're in sort of similar position categories here. So, Sky, why don't you hit us off with the first position it looks like you have here as a running back? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we're going to start off with some flames here, man, and I don't mean to
I know, I saw your list, yeah.
I don't mean to detour people right away, but my first big name without big value, this is kind of cheating because it's not like he doesn't have value, obviously, but it's Zeke Elliott, all right? So hear me out here before you turn off the podcast, please. This is not about me not believing in Zeke Elliott or that Zeke Elliott is not a good pick for fantasy football. Clearly he is. But this is kind of the argument of, for me personally, it's CMC, Saquon, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, then Zeke Elliott at number 5. Then I think some people would make the argument that maybe Michael Thomas jumps in there if you're in a full PPR. Some people fucking super love Derrick Henry, so maybe he jumps. It gets kind of wishy-washy, whereas just maybe a few months ago, Zeke was the guaranteed number 3.
Yep.
I just don't feel that way. Love Zeke Elliott. He's averaged 292 carries since entering the league in 2016. He's surpassed 1,300 rushing yards in 3 of his 4 seasons. The one season he didn't, he actually had 983 yards in 10 games, which would have paced him well over 1,500 total yards. Dude's an animal, all right? That's not the problem. Right. I think the knocks and why I have him out of my top 3 are 3 reasons. Number 1, his new head coach, Mike McCarthy, formerly with the Packers, of course. His rushing attacks, Mike McCarthy's rushing attacks, his last 3 years with the Packers were ranked 29th, 27th, and 32nd overall in the league. Now, I totally understand. None of his running backs were Zeke Elliott. I fully understand.
Yeah, but at least he wasn't a slouch.
It's game script. And I'm not saying that Dak Prescott is Aaron Rodgers, but Dak Prescott is able to throw well over 600 yards as well, and there's plenty of weapons, and arguably more weapons as a package than Aaron Rodgers ever had in Green Bay as a total unit. So that is a little bit scary to me. His running backs also had 50 targets in just 3 times over his duration in Green Bay. Zeke makes a lot of his bread kind of quietly in the passing game. I don't think that's going to happen again in Green Bay. Let's hope Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, helps continue that, because I think he's fabulous. And I think he's the new Sean McVay, if you will.
Sure.
But I'm a little bit scared. Number 2, all-pro center Travis Frederick had retired. I know the offensive line and the guys up front don't get a lot of love in fantasy football. However, I actually played offensive line in high school. I'm kind of a soft spot for the big fellas. He is arguably a Hall of Famer, but he is a huge issue. He didn't play much last year as well with the injury, and then he finally retired. But missing a piece like that, the mentality, right? So I think of like Jason Kelsey with the Philadelphia Eagles, smallest dude on the field as far as NFL terms are concerned, but his mental ability to call out coverages, call out blitzes, shift the line for all these other plays is massive. And when you don't have that veteran leadership up front, that worries me a little bit as well. For Zeke, number 3, comparative to Dalvin Cook, who now sounds like he will be coming back. There's no holdout, which I wouldn't worry about. Worry about, because he just can't hold out with the new contract,
the new CBA, right?
Exactly. So he's good to go. But basically, comparing him to Dalvin Cook, unlike Dalvin Cook, who basically has only Adam Thielen to take away touches, right? Justin Jefferson's there, obviously the tight ends, I guess, but not so much. Zeke is competing with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Blake Jarwin, right? And even Dak Prescott on the ground, who's rushed for over 1,200 yards and 21 total touchdowns in his 4 years as the Cowboys quarterback. So it's super nitpicking, and I love Zeke Elliott in general. If I end up with him as my, 5th, 6th, 7th pick somehow, I would be thrilled. That's not going to happen because that's not how fantasy drafts are going to work. So I'm going to just end up not having Zeke Elliott on my team this year. But for me personally, especially in a full PPR, which the TCK pod is generally focused on, I just give the edge, obviously, to Saquon and CMC, but Alvin Kamara as well. And Dalvin Cook now, too, coming back, and he should have plenty of time getting into this offseason here to be just fine. Also, I won't run through all of Tony Pollard's hype, but I'm really pumped on Tony Pollard as well.
Sure.
And just like Alexander Madison or Latavius Murray behind Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook, Tony Pollard, man, looks amazing. He had a few 20-yard, 30-yard runs last year. He didn't score on them, so we don't remember them as fantasy players, but he set the table for Zeke or Dak or someone else to get that touchdown. But, dude, he is the truth as well. So I think he's going to get a little bit more work. So this isn't fading Zeke as a whole necessarily. It's more knocking him off the pedestal of that guaranteed number 3, especially in PPR.
Yep, makes total sense, man. And if you don't mind, one point I wanted to ask you about here, you mentioned the Kellen Moore and Mike McCarthy splits. Do you think McCarthy's gonna make it the Kellen Moore offense, or do you?
Yes.
Oh, you do. Okay, right. Yeah. So Josh on our end also believes that as well. He's very much a Kellen Moore truther, and he doesn't think there's going to be much Mike McCarthy paint, let's say, on the canvas of the Dallas Cowboys offense.
I don't think this year, and only because Mike McCarthy was out of football, right? If he was coming over straight up from a team right now and jumping in, I think he would have a little more hands-on approach. But Kellen Moore, of course, great quarterback at Boise State, and then longtime backup, never really made it in the pros. But the dude knows what he's doing. He's a young guy. He's innovative. That's why I compare him to Sean McVay, because he really has kind of an innovative approach. But again, for Zeke, dude, it's just like, look, he's an animal. He's going to have probably fucking 10 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. So I'm going to be talking out of my ass. But the reality is, though, like all these other weapons and all this entire offense as a whole, they just don't have to ride Zeke. And I think that matters when you're talking about a top 5 pick in fantasy. So I do think it'll be Kellen Moore heavy, which benefits Zeke overall. But the reality is, if for some reason they struggle for a game or two, Mike McCarthy's a stubborn-ass dude. That's why he and Aaron Rodgers couldn't make it better than it was. So I could definitely see him kind of being like, all right, kid, I gave you a shot. Now it's my turn. And that would be great for Dak Prescott, but not so much for Zeke Elliott.
Yep, exactly. Cool, man. All right, we'll move right on to the next guy here. I have also in the running back category, Melvin Gordon. So I feel like there's not been a lot of talk about Melvin Gordon, and I feel like there should be. And I'm not really sure why there isn't, because right now he's going in early round 4, ADP 38. He's kind of going off the board at the running back 17, 18, which doesn't feel like it feels like people are already fading him. But he's going around these guys, okay? So when we're talking about drafting, we're talking about PPR. He's going around your boy Lev Bell. He's going around David Johnson. He's going around James Conner, Chris Carson in sort of the running back category. In general, none of those guys seem appealing to me, and so I'm not even going to be comparing Melvin Gordon to those guys. But he is going around guys like Cooper Kupp, A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton. So for me, I think if you play out your draft correctly, and let's say you go running back heavy in the first 2 rounds, and let's say, I don't know, you can even snag, a wide receiver or a tight end in that first round. The only way that I can see Melvin Gordon being a good stash play is if he ends up as your like running back 3 on your team. If now on the flip side of that, if you go wide receiver first, tight end, quarterback, something along those lines, and Melvin Gordon ends up being your first running back, dude, you're going to be in some serious hurt for the entire season. And I say this for a couple of reasons. The first thing I go to at Melvin Gordon is all of it. Dude, he's got a stash full of injuries. I don't know if people forgot about this because he had like a relatively healthy season in 2019. But prior to that, he was low-key like the OG Dalvin Cook, right? So in 2016, he had a season-ending injury with his hip strain. In 2015, he had a week 15 season-ending injury. He ended up having to get arthroscopic knee surgery. He was out 6 to 8 weeks. But on top of that, in 2017, he had 4 injuries. He had a knee strain, shoulder sprain, foot sprain, knee strain. 2018 had a hamstring sprain, an MCL sprain. Like the dude is not there's miles on this tractor trailer here, right? He's not a small dude. He's 6'1", 215. So there's a lot of things that kind of concern me just from a health standpoint. The other thing is, and I think this is true for almost, again, back to the COVID-19 thing, any player that's moving into a new system without a whole ton of time to get trained properly like they normally would, especially a guy like Melvin Gordon who probably needs that extra time to get going, right? So he, even in arguably his best season in 2017, he had 1,100 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, 58 receptions, 4 touchdowns. That only placed him running back 5 for that season. He was behind Gurley, Lev Bell, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt. So even when he had time, had a great season, fully prepared, his highest finish was RB5. Okay, so now let's take a look at his ability as a player in general. So if you go look at playerprofile.com, Melvin Gordon regressed in these following areas, and this is with a healthy season, right? Breakaway runs, evaded tackles, juke rate, and his yards created from 2018 to 2019. And obviously, with the rise of Austin Eckler, you basically lost opportunity share, which made perfect sense because Austin Eckler was actually smoking it. But now he's going to be in a new system with another Austin Eckler and Philip Lindsay. And the other thing is too, it's like Royce Freeman's still there. Like he actually hasn't gone away either. And I know Sky, dude, you've been
Quack.
Yeah, you've been a Royce Freeman truther for a while. And to be fair, like, look, some people might be bullish on Royce Freeman. He ended up with the second most receptions on the entire Broncos offense last season. So like he is no slouch either. So they have like a three-headed monster in the backfield, which is good for the team, but really bad for Melvin Gordon as a whole. Now they paid him an absurd contract. I'm sure Lucas isn't probably too happy about that. $13 million guaranteed. Like I even wrote down like Lucas is not going to be happy about that number.
He doesn't like to pay his running backs. That's true,
dude. Exactly, and that makes perfect sense, especially when you have a guy who's been in the league for so long, and it's just that money is just ridiculous. My last point here is that the team's going to be more focused on making sure Drew Lock is set up for success, and not necessarily that Melvin Gordon is getting his dollar's worth. They really don't care about that. I think Vic Fangio is not going to be so concerned with, are we squeezing this Melvin Gordon lemon like dry, right? I don't think they fucking care about that. They care about the young quarterback. They want to make sure they're going to be setting him up for success. I'm sure there'll be a lot of, Noah Fant will be involved. I'm sure, look, Melvin Gordon will get his. I just don't see him being a tried and true, even RB2 for this season. I think he's going to continue to take massive regressions until basically he retires. I just think his ceiling, 2017 was the best year. If he drafted him, awesome. But we're not going to see the Melvin Gordon of old, and I don't think it's going to happen this year. And on top of that, like I mentioned, the injuries scare me very much. So I digress. That's my Melvin Gordon rant.
Man, unfortunately, I totally agree here.
I like him as a player, but it's just,
I will say this. Melvin Gordon, I think, is a top target for me if I happen to go 0 RB, right?
Yes.
Which I don't know. Lucas and I have been going back and forth on our podcast about that. I just did a 0 RB mock draft to end up wide receiver week, which we've been doing kind of week by week for positions. The week before that, I did a running back heavy draft to see what had happened. And that running back heavy team came out so much more sexy than
of course
the 0 RB team. Now the 0 RB running or wide receivers, of course, were stupid. Mm-hmm. But the rest of that roster just gets like
exactly.
Stupid. Now, however, if you do go 2 or 3 running wide receivers early, just at the point of your draft, Melvin Gordon would be a fine RB1 or RB2 if you did that in the 4th, 5th round.
Sure.
But otherwise, I'm totally with you, man. Vic Fangio, being the head coach, he's going to want to run the ball a lot, which is great. But again, people are just like dismissing Philip Lindsay.
I know.
As a UDFA, which is undrafted free agent for anybody unaware, out of Colorado, right? So he bursts onto the scene. They draft Royce Freeman, my dog, in the 3rd round. Okay. Yep. Comes in, prolific collegiate running back. Royce Freeman was a fucking animal at University of Oregon. He comes in and just gets straight up beat out by this random fucking guy, Philip Lindsay, who's a UDFA, right?
He's a dog, man. He's hungry.
Runs for 2,000 yards both years. Mm-hmm. And now they bring in Melvin Gordon, which is kind of a punch in the face.
It was weird. I agree.
I think Royce Freeman's going to be an excellent secondary option for Philadelphia in a couple of weeks, but I'll just throw that out there.
Sure.
Well, I think Philip Lindsay is going to eat into Melvin Gordon. And I know that the name and the pedigree is with Melvin Gordon, but Philip Lindsay in Denver has clearly proven himself twice.
Dude, back-to-back seasons in 1,000+ yards. Like
Lucas and I are going back and forth with this, man. Like Lucas is our, house Bronco fan. I think there's a world where they paid Melvin Gordon. You just mentioned it. He will start. Yeah. He'll get the first snap of day one.
Sure.
I would be shocked if it's any more than 60-40 split Melvin Gordon to Philip Lindsay. Straight up.
Yeah.
And I think Philip Lindsay will start with 3rd down work. But that might be Melvin Gordon's role eventually if he starts wearing down at the end of the season.
Right.
It's going to be really interesting, man. To be honest with you, I'd rather take the value on Philip Lindsay as my RB4.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And I think that's the thing.
Royce Freeman gets traded and grab him later as well and pick him up in Dynasty because he's still a beast and he's going to land somewhere great. Like Matt Breida got another chance in Miami. I think that's similar. So
Yeah.
I'm with you, man, unfortunately. But Melvin Gordon was incredible, had a few incredible years as a top 5 running back for the Chargers. But again, he sat out last year, and then Austin Eckler came out, similar to Philip Lindsay, like style-wise.
Yeah, right.
And he came in and just smashed, right? Number 1 running back over the first 4 games, whatever. Melvin Gordon got worried for his job, came back.
Yeah.
He was terrible for 4 games when he came back, finally hit his stride in week 8 the rest of the way and dug into Austin Eckler. But Austin Eckler still paced that Chargers team in fantasy football. So
exactly,
I could see a similar thing happening this year with Philip Lindsay, man. I really can.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just, again, if I'm in the draft here and I'm looking at options around the Melvin Gordon marker, look, if I need that back end running back, I'd rather wait, hold off, get Philip Lindsay late, and then I'll snag Cooper Kupp and AJ Brown and feel very good about what I have in front of me. So that's kind of the strategy I'm taking.
Also, just to be clear, just to give my 2 cents on his ADP and who's going around him, you mentioned Chris Carson, David Johnson, James Conner. I personally would rather have James Conner for sure over, even with the injury concerns. I get it. While he's that number 1 back, he will get all the work there in Pittsburgh. David Johnson, even maybe, depending on how that goes, just because of the 300-plus touches he's going to get if he stays healthy. And then Chris Carson, again, will be a workhorse until he fumbles or gets hurt. Rashad Penny's starting to look good in his preseason workout videos.
Yeah.
Carlos Hyde is basically just another version of Chris Carson, so he'll get eaten into as well. But, man, I don't know. Melvin Gordon was a target for a long time for me, like a must-have Alvin Kamara, if you will.
Yeah, felt good.
For years.
Yeah.
And now I'm just kind of like, man, I don't want to put myself in a position where I have to grab him
Dude, I know.
in a draft. And it feels weird, but unfortunately we play the situation. We don't play the players most of the time.
Exactly.
The situation does not look good. Now, if Melvin Gordon comes out and rushes for 1,100 yards, catches 50 balls, and gets 10 touchdowns, I'm more than happy to eat this one.
Me too.
I'm with you, Chris. I don't think it's going to happen.
Cool, dude. All right, let's move on to the next guy here. We're going to go, I think, wide receiver.
Yeah, let's do it. So here's another one too. So T.Y. Hilton is my guy, and I apologize to some of the Commish crew already for this one. I know I'm going to get some kickback on this one, I'm sure. But basically, this just comes down to, again, similar to Melvin Gordon, T.Y. had his run, fabulous fantasy player for a very long time, but now he does not have Andrew Luck. He has Phillip Rivers, who I understand can still throw fucking errant, Peyton Manning-esque rainbows. I just don't think it's going to be as accurate as T.Y. is going to need. He's also risky with his injury concerns. Played, 14 games 2 years ago, played 10 games last year. Injuries are starting to pick up to him. And we see every single season, wide receivers, older wide receivers, late 20s, 30s, early 30s, start to really get bogged down by knee concerns, hip concerns, plantar fasciitis, ankles, Achilles, all this shit. Alshon Jeffrey, for example, has just fucking vanished after being unbelievable because he can't temper these lower body injuries. I hate to put the hex on Odell, who I love very, very much, but he's kind of in the same boat where, like, he can't stay healthy for 15, 16, 2-3 years in a row, which is a serious problem. On the other hand, there's younger wide receivers who got hurt early in their career, like Keenan Allen, who people were just kind of giving up on because we knew the talent was there, but he was hurt. But he got healthy, and now he's been Keenan Allen for the last 4 years, which I think is great. Anyway, T.Y. Hilton makes me concerned. The biggest reason, I think, is kind of the unknown, which is my boy Michael Pittman. I think he's an animal, dude.
Rock star.
I think he's gonna be the number one for the Colts sooner than later, whether T.Y. Hilton's awesome or not. I just think he's got that big body. He and Jack Doyle are really the only big presence, big bodies, Michael Pittman, in the red zone there for the Colts, which we know that Phillip Rivers wants, right? He had Antonio Gates forever. He had Jackson. I can't think of his name right now. Sorry, the longtime receiver. I'll think about it. Anyway, they had Michael Williams as well there for a long time, who 1,000 yards plus, double-digit touchdowns. So I think Michael Pittman's going to be that guy now, and T.Y. Hilton just kind of scares me as not a one-trick pony, but he is a deep threat. He's going to have a couple big bombs. He's still a nice best ball grab, but I don't want him in redraft or PPR, certainly. I do think this offensive line is arguably the best in the league. They're going to run the ball first, work off of play action. I think Michael Pittman's going to get a big room. And then think of who is the Keenan Allen who's going to get peppered in this offense. And I think for me, that's Zach Pascal, who's going to be running the slants and stuff over the middle. That's not T.Y. Hilton. So I just, outside of a couple, maybe 2 or 3 deep bombs and maybe a few, first down curls and stuff a game, he'll probably have 6 receptions for 60 yards a week, which is a solid floor. But he's just not the T.Y. that, we're used to, frankly. And another big piece of this, again, is playing the situation, not the player. I'm just going to read a few names around him in current ADP right now. So T.Y. is going as the 53rd player overall, middle of the 5th round, wide receiver 22. Wide receiver 18, Robert Woods. 19, DK Metcalf. 20, DJ Chark. 21, Tyler Lockett. Then T.Y. Hilton. I want all those guys, of course, over.
I'm already drooling just thinking about those.
Even after that. Terry McLaurin, 23. That's hit or miss because of Dwayne Haskins, but the upside's there with T-Mac for show. Keenan Allen, even. PPR monster, should be better than that. Cortland Sutton, Stephon Diggs, even A.J. Green, Marquise Brown, Devontae Parker. The list goes on.
A lot of good names. Yeah.
Every single one of those guys I'd rather have than T.Y. Hilton.
I totally agree.
Again, I think, he had his run. I think he's going to be a nice best ball option in non-PPR if people still actually play that. I think he would actually be a nice value because he's not going to have 100 receptions. He did lead the league in receiving yards a few years ago with Andrew Luck with 1,400 plus. I don't see that coming even close. Yeah. I'm fading the situation. He doesn't pop off the page, and I try to relate a lot of these takes with like my emotional, like, ooh, I'm excited about that. And then I dig in as to, am I actually excited about it? Or I look at a name like David Johnson, and I'm like, fuck, dude, he's old, he's hurt, new team. Yeah. And then I look in the situation, I'm like, actually, shit,
could be good.
Should have plenty of work. Like, I don't know. T.Y. Hilton, like, doesn't match the emotion. And then the, like, what's it going to be like with a new quarterback? It's just kind of like, Phillip Rivers had his time as well. I just, again, not super sexy. And if he's not my wide receiver 3 or 4, I don't want anything to do with T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah, dude, I agree with that. And the only thing I would add is I like the fact that you brought up the Keenan Allen comparison of sorts, just because like that was Phillip Rivers' number 1 guy, and T.Y. Hilton will likely be Phillip Rivers' number 1 guy in Indianapolis. A couple of things. Obviously, T.Y. had a great sort of, season in terms of the ability for overall points. But if you owned Keenan Allen last year, man, he was a goddamn headache. Like, he was a fucking nightmare because he did have like 2 or 3 big games early in the season, but his floor was god awful. I think T.Y. Hilton is going to likely have a floor similar to Keenan Allen without the ceiling upside. That's kind of how I envision this year for him. He'll end up, he'll have a decent season if he stays healthy, but my guess is that that Keenan Allen upside is not there, and that floor is there, which is scary.
I think another part of it too is we talk about the red zone where T.Y. Hilton is not the biggest receiver, but he had a lot of, I don't know about touchdown upside per se, but he got a lot of scores with Andrew Luck, which is pretty surprising for a receiver of his stature. But Jack Doyle's the man there, right? They also brought in Trey Burton, the ghost of Trey Burton, who was supposed to like resurrect the Bears last year, who didn't, but he's still uber talented. And they brought him in on purpose. Like, they want 2 tight ends. We saw what Ebron and Jack Doyle were able to do last year with the Colts as a duo. I think they're going to be just fine. Again, it's just, it's another Paris Campbell is still around as well, floating around. I mean, there's just a lot of bodies out there. Nyheim Hines is going to get a lot of work. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack. I mean, there's just so much to go around. Kind of my similar argument to Zeke. Obviously, Zeke is the person in Dallas.
Right.
But T.Y. is just not the focal point of the offense for the Colts anymore. He just isn't.
Exactly. It's going to be the running game.
I think he's going to be second, third in line at best. And once Michael Pittman takes over, if he does the way that I think he will, he could really fall down in line. And outside of the 2 or 3 games he'll have with 5 receptions for 120 and a score, you're going to get those from T.Y. because he's a speed demon. But other than that, I'm not into it weekly.
It's the Roddy White Julio Jones takeover. So that's what's going on over there.
Love fucking Roddy White back.
Yeah, he was a fucking baller, man. So
same dreads too.
Yeah, exactly. All right, dude. I'll move on to my wide receiver. All right, I didn't want to put him down just because I feel like everybody's fucking destroying Amari Cooper.
Oh, dude, I'll do it for you if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll give you enough time to rally in here. But dude, I do have Amari Cooper, and I think there's a couple of things here. his ADP is going. He's 35 overall, wide receiver 13. That's the thing that scares me the most. He's going to the back half of round 3, but. And again, Sky, you texted me this piece of advice, which is like, even people who do mock drafts when push comes to shove, they don't draft the way that they do in their mock drafts. And that was a really great piece of advice you had given me. And I hope that listeners listen to this, because right now, Amari Cooper is fucking going somewhere in like the back end of the second round and in early third round. And I'm like, that is way too high for this guy, right? So Fantasy Pros has him falling back in the third round, which is it feels better, but I still think it's high. We don't have to go into too much detail here. I think everyone knows the Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup splits, right? I mean, they're basically the same types of numbers. You have the vacancies of Randall Cobb, you have the vacancies of Jason Witten. You already talked about all the weapons and all the offensive power that Dallas has. You have CeeDee Lamb coming in. You have Blake Jarwin, who they did give an extension to, so they're likely going to see some action there in the tight end spot. It just doesn't seem like a scenario where, again, like Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper just gives you way too many headaches. And of course, the reason is, okay, well, why? Well, and again, we've talked about this. A lot of people have talked about this. It's his health. The plantar fasciitis, the shit doesn't go away. He's been dealing with this for fucking, 5 years now, it feels like. And Sky, you've talked about it. You've had it. I've had it. It is very, very painful. I don't even blame him. Like, I don't blame him for the injury. It's just an injury that is it's a nagging injury, and you can't really do anything about it other than like custom soles. Don't play hard on it. But unfortunately for NFL wide receivers, you got to train. And in order to train, you got to use your feet, use your legs. You got to do all the things that you have to do and just suck it up as the season goes. But unfortunately for Amari Cooper owners, year over year, he'll give you the 200-yard game, but then give you like 3 nothings in a row. So it's just too risky for me. It's too much of a, again, like there are just better receivers, better options around that round 3 spot that are much more attractive. If he's a best ball pick, I'm fine with that. We picked him in Dynasty. I don't know how I feel about it now with the CeeDee Lamb take. Unfortunately, we drafted before the NFL draft actually happened, so we have to eat that. Nevertheless, he's not at all on my radar for redraft.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in that same Dynasty draft, the Dynasty Regime League, we're going to be breaking that down with a few people in general, just as we get the season going here in August. We actually took Michael Gallup, which we were ecstatic about at the time. Then CeeDee Lamb gets drafted, and you and I both have Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. So we text each other mid-draft like, "Fuck!"
Yeah, because no one saw it happen.
And then after like a couple weeks of digesting this, I was like, actually, not to harp on the Commish crew, but I was like, I think Michael Gallup now has the edge, just because I think he's going to be that. He's going to be that new number 1. He's a fucking savage.
He's a grittier wide receiver. You know what I mean? So
totally agree. And he's still pretty raw. I mean, he's young, but you're right, man. Amari Cooper, I could go all day. I'm not going to.
Yeah, we don't have to.
Go nuts here. Yeah. But basically, what it comes down to, which you touched on very quickly, Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup basically had the exact same stats of the entire season. Run it out. Every single category, they were pretty much identical, quite literally, within maybe 100 or 150 yards, a catch or 2. 5 targets. I mean, ADOT, everything, right? They were almost identical. The big difference is Michael Gallup played 2 less games. Usually, Amari Cooper plays less games, right? Amari Cooper put in 15. Michael Gallup put in 13. That's a problem. Yeah,
that's a huge problem. Yeah.
That's going to change. All right. CeeDee Lamb is going to fit into the Randall Cobb. I'm not as concerned about that as I was earlier this summer before I really broke it down. All right. So he's got his own targets. I'm not tripping on that. Blake Jarwin's going to be his own thing. Jason Witten, whatever. There's 124 vacated targets. Blake Jarwin will be fine as well. Amari's going to get work. He's going to play well. He's going to probably finish, if he plays a full season or 15 games, he's going to finish wide receiver 15 to 18, I would imagine.
That's the number I had too.
12 if he smashes.
Sure.
But every single week is a pain in the ass. You mentioned Keenan Allen. Right? Yeah. You guys had Keenan Allen last year and Adam Thielen, I think, in the TCK league. Mm-hmm. And both guys ended up finished. Well, Adam Thielen got hurt. Both guys are usually perennially, wide receiver 10 to 15, okay, which is a nice end of season block where you got a wide receiver 1. But every week was just kind of like,
doesn't tell the story.
Is it going to be it? Like,
it just doesn't tell the story.
And so while Amari Cooper can go for 200 yards and or 3 touchdowns any given week because of his talent and that offense, again, best ball is that strategy.
Exactly.
I'm not as excited weekly because I don't want to do the handle. If you're drafting Cowboys, for me personally, I'm going to go Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb. Now, you're obviously not going to draft Michael Gallup before Amari Cooper because that's not how it happens, but that's how I'm ranking the Cowboys in general of how I think they'll finish this year. And to touch really quickly, Chris, on what you mentioned that I had brought up to you, and really Lucas kind of brought it up to me. So it's just kind of this like thought process we're having here, which I think is really important for your listeners to consider, right? And you guys as well, is does ADP matter, right? Is kind of the overlying question. And I don't want to get too much in a rabbit hole here, but basically it comes down to like ADP is the average draft position. Now, what the ADP means that we go off of on Yahoo, ESPN, CBS, Sleeper, Fantasy Pros, Fantasy Calculator, any of that shit, it's basically just thousands of drafts culminated, and then you take the averages. That's what the ADP is. Okay, fine. So enough people are taking Amari Cooper, you know, up in the upper echelon area, right? Looks like a wide receiver 10, 12-ish. So fine. But if you have enough people really dissecting this and bringing his ADP down, that's why guys end up falling, right? That's why somebody like Ronald Jones, who now is running a fucking hill super impressively with Jamal Williams, is going to skyrocket ADP.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Situations changed.
Yeah,
it means
nothing's
that
changed.
people can see it. Right. People can see him beasting out like that. It happens every single season. So just be careful with ADP, man. And when you're drafted with home leagues and you know, people at your fucking work leagues are going to start picking up and everybody just wants another guy. And you come in as the person of like, I actually know what I'm fucking doing. Be smart about it, dude. That's a good opportunity for you to go in there, take the values, pass on the guys that are sexy that everybody wants, grab somebody else, pass on Devontae Parker, grab Preston Williams, pass on Amari Cooper, grab fucking Michael Gallup.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like those are the values that you can pick up because you know what you're doing. Don't draft according to ADP. That is definitely dangerous.
Yes.
If you want to go with ECR, which is the expert consensus ranking, which is on Fantasy Pros and some other sites, that I think is more valid because it's people that are diving into. I know you guys on the Commish you guys just dropped your ECR for wide receivers is what I heard last.
Yep.
And I think that is more of a culmination of like all three of you, four of you, we're talking about this. Somebody's got them high, somebody's got them low.
Right.
Meet in the middle. That's a better average than like 1,000 people pick Amari Cooper because they think they're supposed to versus really breaking it down. So I'm not saying don't draft Amari Cooper ever, but be careful when you're doing it and look around, right? Kenny Golladay, Jarvis Landry, Tyler Lockett, Robert Woods, Mike Evans. I mean, some of these guys you can get, you know, kind of in the general scheme, depending on your format and depending on the ADP. So just be careful with ADP.
Yep, exactly, dude. All right, man. That was a good synopsis of the things that people should care about. We rolled that right into Amari Cooper. Let's go into your next player. I believe we're going to touch on a tight end, correct?
Yeah, let's get into it, man. So it's another not popular opinion in the fantasy circles, but the reality is I have to go with Tyler Higbee here. And I'll start this with I like Tyler Higbee a lot. What he did over the last 5 games of the season last season was better than any 5-game stretch from Gronk, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, Travis Kelce. He absolutely lit the league on fire in the last 5 games. But I want to take that into consideration. Todd Gurley was not Todd Gurley. The Rams defense was in shambles. They were playing from behind most of the time. Jared Goff was throwing the shit out of the ball. Gerald Everett, who's maybe not equally as effective tight end, but he's supposed to be.
Right.
And before Tyler Higbee became Tyler Higbee over 5 games, Sean McVay is very bullish on Gerald Everett. I believe Gerald Everett was Sean McVay's first pick when Sean McVay came in as the Rams head coach. So that matters. When you draft your first guy, you want them to succeed there for the NFL draft. So Gerald Everett was hurt. He was out. Cooper Kupp was playing-ish, but he was beat up as well. There was a lot of issues with the Rams last year that culminated into what Tyler Higbee was able to do. He finished with 522 yards and 2 touchdowns over the final 5 games and easily the number 1 tight end. But he had 55 targets during that time frame. That's just not going to happen, period. Honestly, if he got 70 over the entire season, I think that would be a win. He got 55 in 5 games, right? He and Gerald Everett combined for 85 targets all of 2018, right? And the year before that, they threw to the Rams threw to their tight ends even less. So again, I like to, and I know, Chris, you do the same thing, which I think is really important when we break these things down. I'm not hating on Tyler Higbee, the player. If Tyler Higbee was the only tight end for the Rams and they did not have 4, I think, really quality wide receivers, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, my boy Josh Reynolds, who I think is going to explode this year, who's free in every draft format, and Von Jefferson coming in as a rookie, plus 3 running backs that can catch the ball.
Cam Akers, I mean, he's going to see a ton of work.
I mean, even Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown can catch the ball a little bit.
Sure.
And obviously Gerald Everett again. He was the beneficiary of opportunity last year, and he made the most of it. Kudos to him. He fucking dominated with the work that he was able to get. But similar to the Michael Thomas argument in New Orleans, if you give 30 different wide receivers in the NFL, 185 targets, you can't tell me that half of those guys aren't going to have the same or better numbers than Michael Thomas. And again, who would knock Michael Thomas? Not me. The guy's a fucking animal. I'm taking him as my first wide receiver. I love Michael Thomas, but he's got a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he's got 185 targets. Okay? Jared Goff is not that guy. That offense is not that guy. They have a ton of other weapons. In New Orleans, it's Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Maybe E-Money Sanders this year, a little bit of Jared Cook, but that's it. In LA, they have a ton of weapons. And on a clean slate with everybody healthy, I would say Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp definitely ahead of Tyler Higbee. Probably Gerald Everett, even if they're split in time. And then maybe Cam Akers, or depending on who that running back is going to get that work as well. Tyler Higbee all of a sudden is 3rd, 4th, 5th look in that offense. Unless they're maybe out of the red zone. Now with the tight end, if he ends up catching 6 to 8 touchdowns because he's a beast and he's athletic and he can make big plays happen, he'll end up being a top 6 tight end. But on kind of a bird's eye view of the overall landscape, I'm a little bit concerned, that productivity is going to drop because he just won't have that kind of workload this year. But again, he's getting drafted as, a top 10 tight end.
Yeah. And
you're going to go over a guy here next, who I think is a perfect example. It's a similar situation here.
Sure.
Where in the 8th round, if I don't get a Kelsey, I don't get a Kittle, maybe a Zach Ertz, I don't get a Mark Andrews. Although I thought, shouts out to Eric and the rest of your crew for bringing up kind of the notion that Mark Andrews is, type 1 diabetic, and the blood sugar issue is definitely a problem. I'm personally hypoglycemic, which is similar to diabetic, but kind of on the opposite scheme with insulin and things. But that's going to kind of knock down his workload as well.
Sure.
If I don't get one of those top guys, I'm just going to wait. Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith.
Noah Fant, maybe.
Noah Fant. I mean, there's plenty of guys later in the draft that I would rather take a flyer on, who I think, TJ Hawkinson, the list goes on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we do recency bias. And because Tyler Higbee, the last thing we know of Tyler Higbee was like Travis Kelce and George Kittle put together for 5 games.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, I just don't see it happening again this year. Therefore, I am going to fade him, and I'm just not looking at him unless he falls to maybe the 10th, 12th round. But again, in your regular leagues in ADP, that's not going to happen.
Of course.
So I'm probably not going to end up with Tyler Higbee.
Yep. I'll add one more point to this. Our boy Josh broke down and started really crunching some numbers on the correlation between tight end targets to running back targets. And the reason is because tight ends get those over the middle passes like a running back normally would. And like you mentioned, they really kind of just abandoned the passing work over the middle when, really Gurley just became a shell of himself at the end of the year. I mean, he had touchdown upside, but that was basically it. He wasn't the old Todd Gurley. My guess is that Sean McVay, I think that's what he wants to do. He just didn't have the guy to do it. Has Cam Akers, has, the 2 other running backs that can do some work. That most definitely will eat into Higbee's workload as far as a receptions-based pass catcher.
Totally agree.
Good shit, man. All right, let's wrap it up. My guy here. All right, little disclaimer on Austin Hooper. He's going to be my tight end that I'm going to talk about. I actually like Austin Hooper. I actually like Austin Hooper at the current round that he's getting picked at, his ADP. So he's 113, round 10. He's your tight end 9 or 10, and that actually is good. And the reason I say that is not for the people that have been doing their research in June and July. This is for my August Warriors who are coming in and remembering how good of a season that Austin Hooper had last season and forgetting that that was most definitely a product of environment in Atlanta. And so just some of the notable tight ends getting drafted around Austin Hooper is Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki. You have wide receivers like Darius Slayton, Jamison Crowder, Sterling Shepard, all quality players, and quarterbacks like Daniel Jones and Matthew Stafford all around that Austin Hooper marker. So again, depends on how your draft evolves. I'm not even saying don't pick up Austin Hooper in round 10. He's not bad, but I do think that the environment that he's about to go into is not going to be as drastically pass heavy as he once saw in Atlanta. And like we had just talked about, Atlanta was another team that lost their running back and did not have a lot of passing work in that particular section. So just a quick stat here. Atlanta was 65% of the time passing the ball as opposed to running the ball, as highest in the NFL by far. It wasn't even close. Okay. He's now going into an environment where Cleveland, obviously different coaching staff, different structure, but they have two very quality, if not the two best running back tandem in the entire NFL. That's not going to be how they use Austin Hooper in this particular offense. I think he was ranked like 10th among qualified tight ends in man coverage. He's not very good in man coverage. So if they're going to use him in the passing game, it's going to be when it's zone coverage. And the majority of the work that Austin Hooper is going to see, this is going to sound crazy. They paid him this much money to do this, is to block for Nick Chubb and to block for Kareem Hunt. So again, he will perform well. I'm not saying he's not, and I would not be shocked if he performed better than tight end 10. I'm talking to you August Warriors out there. Don't go and draft Austin Hooper as a top 5 if you go buy your book and don't do any of the research or don't listen to podcasts. Well, you wouldn't even get this note anyways. But if you do listen to podcasts and you still buy the book, those books that you get at gas stations, because I know many of guys who do that, and they have Austin Hooper somewhere in like the 6 or 7 spot because they never updated their rankings, don't do it. He is actually more so of a tight end 10. And that's kind of how I see his workload inside the Stefanski offense. Like him, but a lot of weapons, a lot of mouths to feed, and I just don't see how they're not going to utilize better athletes like Kareem Hunt and rely on Austin Hooper to make that happen.
Yep, I totally agree on this one as well. And let's not forget, even though he wants to leave town and maybe the Browns will get rid of him at the trade deadline, David Njoku is still in Cleveland. They also brought in Troutman as well.
Yep.
And, these guys are great tight ends. And again, as you mentioned, with Kevin Stefanski coming in, Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr., had some work in that Minnesota offense, but it funnels through the wide receivers. So that's a good, they're going to run first, obviously. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are going to be fucking nuts this year, individually and as a duo. All right, we know that. If they can stay healthy and recover from their own injury operations this year, Odell and Jarvis Landry should eat as well as Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs did as well this year. When you think of the last 2 or 3 years of Minnesota Vikings, you don't think, damn, their tight end's crushed. You don't. I mean, Kyle Rudolph will catch a touchdown randomly, and you'd be like, oh, shit, yeah, he's still on the team. That's right.
Right.
3 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Austin Hooper had back-to-back tight end 6 performances on the season in Atlanta, but they had Tony Gonzalez, right? They had Jacob Tamme for some years, right? They play that tight end position is a stalwart for Matt Ryan in that offense. That's why Hayden Hurst will probably explode this year going over to Atlanta. I don't see it happening for Austin Hooper. I totally agree. And again, Blake Jarwin, Jack Doyle, all Dallas Goedert even with the upside there. All those other tight ends I'd rather have. And not to mention, not the best strength of schedule. I know that you're not a big strength of schedule guy. I consider it for positions like tight end and like quarterback and like PST because I think it matters. If that linebacker core or that nickel cornerback that comes in is a beast and shuts down tight ends, it fucking matters. Yeah. And a guy that's not going to get peppered in targets like Austin Hooper probably will not, with 2 other tight ends and a bunch of other weapons in that offense in a run-first scheme. I just don't see it happening. The one thing people can bring up is Austin Hooper's history, which, yes, was fantastic in Atlanta. Also, fun little stat, 1/3 of Baker Mayfield's NFL touchdowns have gone to the tight end position. So That's a nice thing to note when they're inside the 20 and
Yeah.
Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham are getting double covered, and they're packing the box with the running backs.
Sure.
Austin Hooper could accidentally have 6 touchdowns. And I say this every single time I talk about tight ends. 60 receptions, 600 yards, and 6 touchdowns will make you a top 10 tight end. That's just how it goes.
Exactly.
So it could happen, but when is it going to happen weekly?
Exactly. I agree with that. And so again, I don't want to sound, we talked about this. This is not, I have gradations of these value picks, right? And so when I say like Austin Hooper's a big name without value, what I'm really saying, again, I really have to make sure this point sticks here. I'm only talking to the people who are feeling bullish on Austin Hooper, or you didn't do your research ahead of time and you have him going in like the tight end 6 or 7 spot. Back to your point about Kyle Rudolph. I mean, look, his best season was 2016 and the guy went off. Like he had 83 receptions for 840 yards and 7 touchdowns, which is good for tight end 2. So I can't sit here and say like in a Stefanski offense, like the tight end isn't going to get a lot of work. That ain't true because Kyle Rudolph made his marker in that particular setting. And by the way, if you go look at that 2016 breakdown, Stefan Diggs and Adam Thielen both ate that season too. Like everybody kind of ate. They had Jerick McKinnon, I think Asiata was their other running back of sorts. Yeah. Like everybody, they actually had a pretty good offense that year, and Kyle Rudolph was one of the focal points. So this, the idea that with all the mouths to feed, Austin Hooper can't get the type of volume or workload is, to me, that's not really one I want to hang my hat on. What I want to hang my hat on is that he made the most that he could in Atlanta in a team that was down their passing options within their running backs. And that was a pass-first team. I just don't see the volume going to be there enough for Austin Hooper. And like you mentioned, look, tight ends can make that. Like Eric Ebron made his mark off of touchdowns a couple of years ago. I think we're going to see a similar situation to that of sorts.
Yeah, and do you see I know we're rounding out the episode here. I'm curious, though, like just with this David Njoku thing, and, I was going to bring up Lev Bell as well when we were talking about Zeke, but I've gone crazy on Lev Bell enough. I think it's important too. One thing that might be something to consider with Austin Hooper specifically is the Browns don't need 3 tight ends. They drafted a rookie. Dude's a beast. He was arguably the top tight end outside of Cole Kmet, I guess, who went to the Bears. They were very bullish on him coming in, so they drafted him, whatever. They had David Njoku, who never really has clicked with the Browns, and then they bring in Austin Hooper. So there's no room for David Njoku. So They move either preseason, week 4, at the trade deadline, whatever. They move away from him. All of a sudden, that's one mouth out of the equation, and Austin Hooper could eat at that point. I think it's important to consider some of these guys like a Tyler Higbee. Daniel Jones is one at quarterback who has a terrible first 4 games of the season. Deshaun Watson, same thing. I'm not drafting those guys, period, unless it's a dynasty league or something. In redraft, I'm not going to draft them no matter what because of the first 4 games. They're brutal. However, I think they will struggle a little bit. Austin Hooper, same thing. They will struggle out of the gate. They could be dropped. They could be very cheap in a trade bundle, something. Now, in the second half of the season, they pick up Daniel Jones, Austin Hooper, and Deshaun Watson all have top 5 second half schedules, strength of schedule, and then playoff schedules as well. Sure. I understand you have to make the playoffs to play the playoffs, whatever. But what I'm saying is their matchups will get easier as the season goes on. So that's something that I would consider maybe punting them in a draft, not drafting them at all.
But trading for them.
Trading for them and then potentially grabbing that upside in the second half when people are feeling like, fuck this, dude. What a terrible draft pick. And that's what happens. Every year that happens with us, right? We're bullish on a guy. They struggle. We say, oh, shit, and we fucking drop him. And then 3 weeks later, how about Devontae Parker for everybody last year? Yeah. Right? He was Devontae Parker for the first 8 games. You're like, oh, damn. All of a sudden, blows up, killer. So temper expectations, but I think that's a great call on Austin.
I like that idea.
Really, all these guys too. And Lev Bell's another one, dude. When he ends up in San Francisco, I'm going to be all over that.
Yeah, dude. To round off your point here, we can close it up with this one. I love the idea of maybe not drafting him, but trading for a guy like an Austin Hooper. So Baker Mayfield was I think he was considered the worst efficient quarterback inside the red zone of 2019.
Yep.
Back to what you're just talking about. Monitor that situation. Like if he's starting to look like an efficient quarterback throughout the entire, or I would say the beginning part of the 2020 season, And exactly, a lot of people are expecting him to. Then maybe make your move for Austin Hooper if he, especially if he hasn't had like that sort of breakout worth $11 million tight end that the Browns should be getting. Chances are he's going to warm up. And by the way, he's another player like Melvin Gordon who, hasn't had the reps inside of that system with that offense with those players. So it's going to take them a little bit to get going with this COVID situation going on. So yeah, dude, love that advice. I think that's going to go very well for people throughout the season.